Hey y'all, welcome to Waterbreak with Waterboy. It's good to be with you guys on the new time, 5 p.m. on Thursday evening. Yes, so we're going to be kind of airing it from here on out at 5 p.m. on Thursday instead of 4 p.m. So thank you for joining us, tuning in, and make sure you share the show. I have, of course, Steve Deace. He's no stranger to the show. It's good to have him here with us. But before I get into what we're going to be getting into today, I wanted to kind of let you guys know about something that we've started here at the Fight Laugh Feast Network, Cross Politic, and kind of what we're doing. As you guys know, a lot of our friends have been canceled off, MailChimp. Babylon Bee was canceled off MailChimp. Gab, social media network, was canceled, I think, out of 5 banks in the last year. I've had even friends fired from Amazon for their managers, and they wouldn't play the personal pronoun game with their with who they're managing, and so they got fired. And so we're seeing this. The cancel culture is really come full steam into the business world. And so one of the things that our way of trying to maybe help with this is we've created Fight Laugh Feast. Go to flfnetwork.com/business, flfnetwork.com/business. And it's just right now at this point, we're just collecting a bunch of businesses that want to work with each other and network with each other that aren't going to be canceled businesses, that are going to be kind of free speech, liberty-minded businesses. So go to flfnetwork.com/business to fill out that form. And we're kind of just right now at this point just creating kind of a business directory of all that, and we'll kind of figure out next steps of what to do there. We already have hundreds of businesses signed up, and we really would love to see you guys there sign your business up on that directory, at least at this point. Okay. Remember what I said a couple weeks ago? 2021 just literally told 2020 to hold my beer. We've even 2020 alone, we've seen inflation skyrocket, massive labor supply, unwilling to go back to work because of all the federal cheddar that they're getting, and I don't think the federal subsidies end until end of September. Expensive supply chain recovery, mandated vaccines and passports, and now I think that the 2021 craze just went international with what we're seeing in Afghanistan. And supposedly, in the midst of all this, we rejected Trump because he was mean, and Biden, Uncle Joe, because he was, some sort of competent, nice guy. But in a real sense, this ramping up of this kind of insanity, this ramping up is a natural progression when you live in a culture that is literally going insane. Insanity does not know how to revert back to normalcy. That's the definition. How insanity is insanity. How can it get back to normal? For insanity to become sanity, what we're actually talking about is we're talking about repentance, new heart, new mind. That's how you get back. That's how you get out of this insanity that we're in. I don't think we thought very clearly about 2020, excuse me. I don't think we're thinking very clearly even when we look back to 2020. And I particularly don't think the church has adequately dealt with how we thought about our own actions in 2020 and kind of the downstream consequences of what just happened in 2020. And my guest, as I mentioned, is Steve Deace. His preferred pronouns are co-author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Faucian Bargain. Those are great personal pronouns. Steve, thanks for coming on the show again.
Anytime, Gabe. How are you, man?
Oh, I'm good. We're going to miss you in Tennessee, but it was good to see you in Rapid City last April. When 2020 ended, I didn't want people to kind of, or people who had their head on straight, I didn't want them to kind of feel relieved. I'm glad 2020's over. And I think the reason why I didn't want that is because I don't think we, like I said in my opening comments, I don't think we really kind of thought through, handled everything well, and even kind of owned how we didn't do very good as, kind of largely thinking as, Christians, conservatives, and people who we expected that should have known better. What should we have learned from 2020 that we aren't really acknowledging?
It can always get worse.
Well, that's why 2021 is like hold my beer, Right. Well, and Why
human nature always gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that if Jacob Arminius was alive today, he would at least grant Calvin's thesis on total depravity. He'd at least grant him that. They might still argue about the other 4 petals on the tulip there, but he would at least say, all right, you got me on the total depravity thing. I hit Google once. John, you beat me. I got my Catholic editor, Todd, looking at me now and quoting, shrugging his shoulders and just saying total depravity, Steve, just total depravity. All right. So, I mean, we don't slouch, far be it for me, proud community college attendee, to argue and debate the inestimable and deceased Robert A. Bork, but we don't slouch to Gomorrah.
Right.
We sprint, brother. We sprint. And that's what we do. And that's what we have to resist doing when the Holy Spirit is at work in our lives, right? I mean, with you and I as guys, I mean, 5 minutes before we started this broadcast, a hot chick could have walked by in yoga pants and we could have spent 30 seconds completely forgetting we were reborn creatures, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. That's right. That's how difficult this thing called individual autonomy and freedom is when you have the Holy Spirit at work in your life, let alone corporately in a culture when the restraining hand of God is moved away. And you know, years ago when I first started doing this full time for a living, 15 years ago now, Gabe, and I remember reading Romans 1 again. And you know, I'd gotten into this, made this transition from sports into news talk, and the gay marriage debate was really raging heavily in the country at the time. And a lot of the premise that I operated my sense of urgency by was that, you know, if we do things like this, we will provoke the wrath of God. And I read Romans 1 again, and then what Paul says, and it blew my mind, man. I just, no, brother, this happening in your culture is the wrath of God.
That's right.
The restraining hand of God removed. These are people who delight in creating new ways to do evil and encouraging others to do the same, given over to their debased minds, that this is the wrath of God, that a culture does this. It goes there.
That's right.
Because the restraining hand of God has been removed and we've been given over to our own basic instincts.
That's right.
And that, and the, you know, not speaking eschatologically, but just culturally, the birth pangs are getting quicker here on this landmass now. It's getting crazier. Stuff that we thought was, wow, that's insane in 2004 and 5 and 6 just seems beyond quaint now.
Right.
People that we would have argued vehemently against on issues like gay marriage, like Dave Rubin, a colleague of mine at the Blaze, or Andrew Sullivan, perhaps the most respected gay intellectual in the country. Nowadays, their Twitter feeds, frankly, on a lot of subjects look a lot like stuff like you and I would tweet, okay? Because they're like, what in the Sam Hill is this? This is insane, okay? And it's because the restraining hand, I believe the restraining hand of God has been removed.
That's right. You know, I coordinated Andrew Sullivan, had him fly out here and debate Doug at University of Idaho. Man, it must have been, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And I remember one of the questions Doug asked him in the debate was, because Andrew Sullivan was like, no, this is it. This is all we need is gay marriage. That's it. And Doug's, of course, the slippery slope question is, well, why not tranny marriage, polyamory marriage, polygamy marriage? And Andrew said, oh, that'll never happen. That was his response, was basically like the line, for some reason, whatever this artificial line is, it stops right here. And it'd be interesting to have a follow-up conversation with Doug and Andrew after what's gone on in this last year. I don't think the church really even acknowledges what you just said there. I don't think the church really thinks that Romans 1 is that we're going insane. The church is, you look back at all the decisions the church has made this last year. Now, I think there's exceptions. Kerry Gordon in Iowa, I think our church handled it well. I think there were some exceptions there. John MacArthur's church figured it out and did a really good job down the road. But in general, I mean, you got Russell Moore just came. I don't know if you saw this, but Russell Moore came out this past week. He was interviewed by religionnews.com or something like that. And he said, Christians should be contagious with the gospel, not the coronavirus. In other words, get vaccinated. And so all like the major big Eva, and again, this is the issue is not, do you have a Christian liberty to get vaccine or not? That's not ever the debate right now, even though people want to try to turn it into that. The issue is the culture of what's going on, the forced vaccinations, and the way the wind's blowing. And Russell Moore is like just playing right into it.
Because game recognized game, bro. The spirit of the age, demons quote scripture too. Okay, so I mean, just because Russell Moore worked at the Southern Baptist Convention doesn't mean anything. Name any meaningful culture fight in the last 20 years that he went to the mattresses on on behalf of the gospel. Name one.
Nope, that's right.
You can't. Okay.
That's right.
And by the way, I believe there's a commandment against bearing false witness, I believe. I think hasn't been downgraded as suggestion.
Yeah.
Our own CDC admits that the current COVID vaccines do not stem the tide any longer against transmission. Rochelle Walensky, she admitted this on CNN over 2 weeks ago now.
Yep.
Or it was about 2 weeks ago now. It was August the 6th when she admitted this.
Right.
The data in Israel shows it. In fact, in Israel, their own data from their Ministry of Health shows 40%
That's
of their
been
new
unbelievable.
infections where cases are exploding. 40% of them are fully vaccinated individuals. Less than 1% are those who previously were known to have had COVID, like myself, and recovered, or natural immunity, which they want to completely ignore and pretend does not exist. If you look at New York State, for example, one of the most vaccinated states in the country, since the 1st of June, cases in that state have gone up 600% in that state. Oregon right now, another one of the most vaccinated states in the country, hospitalizations have matched their current peak, the peak they had last year.
Wow.
Back to Israel. There's a story in the New York Times today admitting the truth, what I've been telling my audience for weeks, that these vaccines no longer push back against cases meaningfully. And so Israel is reporting now 59% of its hospitalizations, which have grown 31% in the last week. 59% of those hospitalizations in Israel, fully vaccinated individuals. All right. So Russell Moore is just that what he's telling you is just not true.
Yeah.
Now, that's not an argument against getting vaccinated. You still may be in a high risk group, and you may say even questionable efficacy. I need all the help I can get. I'm 70. I'm morbidly obese. I'm diabetic. I've got autoimmune. I work around people that are like that. I care for my grandmother who fits those descriptions. So those are different questions, okay?
100%.
But in terms of mandates and you have some kind of blind duty to get injected with something we've never put into people before, the reality is the data just doesn't show that if you are not vaccinated, you are any more likely to spread this virus than the people who are, period. Now, that's just unfortunately where we are right now.
The data that you just rattled off from Israel to New York to Oregon, is that due to the variant?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's the explanation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I think there may be a counter explanation. There are two reasons a virus mutates. The most often, that's another word for variant. The most often reason is because it does it naturally. It's trying to figure out how to endemically survive.
Right.
Okay. And so that's why we have old coronaviruses that mutated into what we now refer to as colds. Okay.
Right.
So that's one reason. And that's the common reason in natural immunology and virology.
Right.
The other reason, though, is what is called a leaky vaccine. And in vaccinology, there are two types of vaccines. One is the perfect vaccine. And this is where the vaccination effort blocks antibodies from infecting the host. Okay.
Right.
But then there is what's called the leaky vaccine, where it will then bind antibodies together so that this will then now create new mutations. And in this scenario, new mutations tend to become worse rather than in the natural scenario when they become better from a human perspective. Meaning
less effective.
Less lethal.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right. And so are we, I still have, like you, I'm super jaded even with these reports of this vaccine. I do think I am suspicious that the vaccine is causing more of an outbreak because because they're carrying the coronavirus and it's shedding, even though they might not have any symptoms. So I think that might be a possible explanation, but I'm having a hard time even believing what they're saying about the Delta variant. I heard, the Lambda variant starting to come in. I can't trust anything the CDC.
Brother, they're going to have, until people decide they're not going to obey this anymore, I promise you we're going to get to 666 variants if you hear me knocking on the door, okay?
100%, yeah.
They're going to keep coming. Now, let me give you some data that may reinforce your case. Yesterday, we broke our streak, August 18th. We broke our streak here in the United States. We had been under 1,000 daily deaths for COVID for 132 consecutive days, okay? And that would place COVID slightly above diabetes amongst the most, which would be around 7th or 8th most likely way to die in a given day in America, all right? So yesterday, we had 1,055 deaths to break that streak. On August 18th of 2020, we suffered 1,350 deaths with COVID. So fairly similar number. And that is before we had any vaccines. That's before we had any treatments. In fact, it wasn't until October of last year that CDC put out its first treatment guidelines for COVID when remdesivir and Regeneron, which that's what President Trump was given, that's when they were approved for the public, okay? And Regeneron sometimes goes by the term monoclonal antibodies, which that has actually been a very effective big pharma treatment. Remdesivir is a scam, but Regeneron has actually been very effective, and the data on that is good. Okay. But prior to that, for 8 months, what we told people last year was, if you test positive, go home and isolate for 10 to 14 days. If you show no symptoms and then test again and you're negative, come back to life. If you begin to show symptoms, continue staying home unless you can't breathe and then go to the ER. That was it. That's all that we offered. Apparently, we were out of leeches. All right. We were out of copper bracelets.
Vitamin C.
2021. And that's all we could offer for a respiratory virus. Like, we had never heard of antiparasitics like ivermectin that just won the Nobel Prize in 2015 or anything. So for 8 months last year, we had no treatments. And we had no vaccines, at least no treatments that were approved by the process. And yet our death number really is not that much different. 300 more people died on this date last year than on this date this year. Wow. Last year at this time, you had a 0.004% odd of dying of COVID on August 18th. This year on August 18th, it's 0.003. So keep that in mind. All of this is about, what is that? 0.03 of a decimal point? Or 1/100th of a decimal point? That's what we're arguing about. We're mandating all of this for something that doesn't stop the spread and gave us a 1/100th of a percent improvement on deaths from where we were a year ago. Does that seem like something worthy of imposing a tyranny over? Doesn't seem like it to me.
We had Pastor Wilson on. I can't remember. I know we had him on the last 4 or 5 months, and he said this, but I think he said it last year too. But within the last 4 months, he said, the second crime scene is always worse than the first. So if you're driving down the road, you're in the van, a van pulls up. You're walking down the road, a van pulls up next to you, and they grab you and pull you in the van. Well, if you don't throw down there, it's the second crime scene is going to be worse than that first one. And you mentioned this earlier, but to me, it's like we're 8 crime scenes down the road, 9 crime scenes down the road. We haven't been thrown down for 9 crime scenes, and now here we are. And the government just doesn't give up its authority. It just doesn't give up its emergency orders. Never has, right? How do we sort through this and try to bring about some sort of reset in what the government has taken from us?
I see we have 2 major problems here, my friend. And one is, we don't even know what metric it is we're trying to conquer. Okay. Yeah. If I point out we're doing well on deaths, then I get inundated with cases are exploding. If I point out cases are exploding, people are like, Well, but it's about deaths and hospitalizations. We don't know what is it we're trying. Like in World War II, we understood a win was, Nazis show up in command. That we knew it was a win when the Japs boarded the USS Missouri and signed unconditional surrender.
That's right.
What is the win here? Right. We don't know what it is. That's why I said early on last year we need to name this virus Afghanistan. We don't know what the win is. What's the win? Is it zero COVID? Well, that's permanent fascism. Ask Australia and New Zealand.
Right.
So what's the win here? Number one, we can't decide on that. And then number two, we don't know who would tell us we had the win.
Right.
Because there is no Walter Cronkite at 6:00 or no government institution we all agree or trust on the merits. Okay.
Yep.
But we've never developed anything like that for a coronavirus ever. And then in light of that happening, the only other way out is the calculus has to change on the leverage. Right now, it is more painful for us than it is for them. That has to change.
Right.
The amount of pain. Hey, you want to inject all the nurses in this? I guess, I don't know, go find 20,000 new nurses. Good luck.
Right.
All right. Now, I guess you're going to need 15,000 new teachers, I guess. Okay, cool. Good luck with that. Like the pain of imposing this. That's what a Montgomery bus boycott was. All right, you want to make us ride in the back of the bus? Cool. We're most of your bus riders. We'll just stop riding it. Good luck with that.
Right.
All right. The pain has to be more on the imposer than the imposee.
That's right. That's exactly
right. We
right.
have to show up not just in force at the school board meeting, which is great, but then when the school board votes anyway to muzzle your kids, which they almost always will, all the people that showed up there to rally, the next day send their kids to school without any masks. Go ahead. I guess you can expel 500 kids. Go ahead. I'd like to see you try doing it.
Yep.
See, we have to do stuff like that. We better get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
All right. Because right now, one side just loves the spirit of the age is all about that confrontation. And we're all about that passive aggressive. So unless there's a new Jonas Salk out there waiting in the wings that's going to save us from this with a medical marvel,
right?
Then we're going to have to actually walk through that fire ourselves and say, go ahead, do your worst. And I think those are the only two ways out of this.
Right. I am come to the conclusion this last year that politicians aren't principled. We don't really have a principled. Now, every once in a while, we might run and find a rare nugget that is actually genuinely principled. I haven't found one in a long time. And so I think politicians tend to function off relationships and pressure.
Yes.
And that's how they make decisions. Big corporate interests, whatever. I had a friend in Washington. Well, incompetent Inslee's just going crazy over there. And he's mandating Christian schools teachers to have vaccines. He's got to get a lawsuit, class action lawsuit there. But like firefighters, police, everybody, he's just saying all government employees need to get vaccinated. And I told my buddy who's a firefighter, I was like, man, firefighters are a pretty loyal group. You should get them all together and go up to the governor's mansion and do a sleepover on the lawn, just like what Sheila Jackson just did.
My understanding was public sector employees had a union.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
Yeah. Why not use it?
Yeah. I thought, what else is it there for then? Why are you paying them any dues?
Yep. What are we? We got 3 more years of Biden, man.
No, you don't.
You don't think so?
No.
You think he's gonna get the 25th on him?
I think you're watching, and I've thought this long before we even got to this juncture.
Yeah.
You're just watching a dementia patient in real time, and you can see all the patterns. It's why he rarely appears in public on consecutive days.
Right.
It's why he seems so much more assertive when he's inside the White House than when he's at a live event, where he's in an organic setting all day long and something he's not familiar with. Go watch video of Joe Biden communicating in 2012 and 2016 compared to now. I mean, all the obvious signs for any of us that have ever dealt with a loved one with dementia, they are all there.
Wow. So then we got 3 more years of Kamala Harris.
You have a few more years of the cackling, I believe. Yes.
I can't imagine it's not going to get any better these next 3 years. What plays should we be running as Christians, as conservatives, to to handle these next 3 years?
We've got to walk and chew gum here, Gabe. On a meta level, on a spiritual level, it's revival or bust. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that means we need reformation from a worship standpoint, and that we worship God in the way he is worthy, not the way that we are willing. Right. In the way that he is worthy. Mm-hmm. We need to take discipleship at least as serious as evangelism, if not more so, because that's the call, is actually not to evangelize the nations, it is to disciple them.
That's right.
And then on a civic level, we have to make red states and red communities within states red again. Mm-hmm. And they all have to be as red as California is blue.
Yeah, that's right.
So that in my community, you would not even think of bringing that crap here. Mm-hmm. You would not even contemplate it, because you would find out if we still believed in tarring and feathering here.
Right.
In my state, you won't even consider bringing that crap. Yeah, in your state of Idaho right now, when people see a Democrat, they call 911. Okay. What do you have, like 4 Democrats in your entire legislature or something like that?
Yeah, not very much. We got 2 counties in Idaho that are pretty much kind of blue. That's it.
But your Republicans there, frankly, well, I believe the theological term is suck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 100%.
That's a major problem. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so in a state like Idaho, West Virginia, where the spirit of the age has not won a precinct in a presidential election in West Virginia since 2008. Mm-hmm. That state, that we ought to be, people like us ought to be going to West Virginia right now and saying, hey, dude, you guys are moving way too far to the right, man.
Right.
But the opposite is happening in these places.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So red on a civic level, red states and red communities and red cities need to be as red as the blue areas and states are blue.
Yep. So
that there are safe spaces, pardon the pun,
yep.
and places where the Puritans can live amongst the Dutch here.
That's right.
Our way of life.
Right.
Those are the only 2 solutions I see moving forward.
Right.
I've got good friends of mine talking about things like national divorce. Mm-hmm. First of all, I'd love that idea.
Yeah.
Just show me where there has been a peaceable national divorce ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That there just hasn't been. I don't see that happening.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I don't see that happening as anything other than a precursor to another civil war. Right. So to me, I think we've got 2 options, that we have to work these angles simultaneously.
Right.
Spiritually, it's revival. Mm-hmm. And then in the natural, it is, we've got to make red areas and states and communities as red as the blue areas are blue.
Yep. That's right. That's right. I've been meaning to want to ask you this for a while. But what's your eschatological views? Post-mill, pre-mill, everything's going to pan out. What's going on?
My official eschatological position is confused.
Okay.
I will say that, you know what? I'll be brutally honest.
Yeah.
I have my career in politics has made me hesitant to adopt either of the 3 predominant views,
right,
because I've seen too much of how people behave politically in the arena in light of that. I'll give you an example of each. For the premillennial view, I mean, I've seen it just drive people nuts, insane, conspiratorial, to the point where I'm thinking, we want Jesus to come back, right?
Yep.
Like
that, amen.
Like, we want that.
Yep.
I mean, we're afraid that that the rapture could be tomorrow and the pact could be cut to rebuild the temple. I mean, I would think we'd be like everybody's. I don't know that we'd be sending money, or demanding to stop Iran from attacking Israel. I would think we'd be tempted to do the opposite, which is, shh, we're about to get up out of here. You know?
Yep.
I mean, I've never understood that. I've never understood trying to drive a car with the gas and brake on at the same time. Let's go win a culture war, but we live in the Laodicean era, so we know we're going to lose, but fight like hell anyway. I just don't understand that.
That's all, Mill, for those who are following us here.
The all mill view I struggle with, because I've seen too many politicians act as if, well, when I'm in office, I'm in the city of man, so I can behave like them here.
Yeah.
Okay. That whole two kingdoms ideal. Yeah. So I've really struggled with that. I'm pretty confident that Augustine thought we should live distinctively. That was the whole point of that exercise. Not when in Rome, do as the Romans. But okay, maybe I read maybe that was ripped out of my copy of City of God.
Yeah.
And then on the post-mill view, I have really struggled with the idea that the people who think the church prevails in history can never find anybody who's ever good enough to support. So I just put a John Calvin avatar on my Facebook page, and everybody sucks and everybody's terrible. And this guy's got a mortgage that he borrowed too much money, and so he shouldn't. I mean, I literally have seen that. I've literally seen that level of, so the church prevails in history, but like no one is good enough to support.
Right.
Like I would kind of think you'd be more tempted to sell out, actually. Like you'd be like, well, the church prevails in history, so we can use any scoundrel we want.
Right.
We can do anything that we want. So one side thinks that we lose in history, but they seem to be the most committed to fighting a culture war they don't think they have any shot of ever winning.
Right.
Another side is convinced that we just all exist here, until Jesus returns to, the parable of the weeds to separate the two.
Right.
But in the meantime, though, I don't know when Jesus could come back. But in the meantime, while in office, I get to behave as if I am a weed, and it's totally cool because I got to get reelected.
Right.
And then another group thinks the church prevails in history, but then like no one's ever good enough to actually go to war with. So let's just huddle out here and throw a John Calvin avatar up on my Facebook page and call it good. All right.
Right.
And so I've had too much exposure to too many people with all three of these theories.
Right.
Now, I know that that's a cop out for me on an intellectual level.
Yeah.
So intellectually, I have some serious issues with the pre-mill view.
Yeah.
But one, I do think there is a compelling case for the rise of a future man of lawlessness that I think with some form of not completely primitive or specific preterism, I could explain a lot of I could make a lot of historical cases for a lot of things that pre-mills think are still to occur in the future. Okay.
Right.
But I think you the stumbling block is the idea of the rise of a man of lawlessness, the rise of an antichrist. Paul makes it very clear to the church members in Thessalonica that thought they were left behind, that had not occurred because this man in the future had not yet arisen. Now, did that happen later? A lot of this also comes down to the argument of when do you think Revelation was written? Yep. For hundreds of years, the church thought Revelation was written in 60-something AD. It's been more recently that we thought it was 91 AD. So, I mean, a lot of these, frankly, are viewpoints that are probably beyond my grasp as a layman, to be frank.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's been helpful with me in this whole conversation, post-mill, pre-mill, all-mill, is kind of throw away that terminology for a little bit and just, can we all agree that Jesus is king over heaven and earth?
Agreed.
Yeah, right.
All authority in his great commission, all authority.
Yep.
Because see, even if I'm pre-mill, the enemy does not get his time on earth at the end unless the sovereignty of God grants it.
Right. That's right.
To bring his plan of salvation, ultimate salvation and judgment and redemption and restoration forward, right?
Yeah.
See, this is the argument I always make too with people who are very hyper on free will in choosing their salvation. Did you choose for Jesus to die for you? Did you choose when Jesus set foot on earth? Did you choose when Jesus was born in a stable? No. So who took that initiative for all of those events to happen? God. So we all agree in the sovereignty of God.
Yep.
So we're not arguing about the limits of the sovereignty of God then.
That's right.
What we're arguing is therefore under that banner, what is the extent then of the free will of man? See, we switch it around. We argue the sovereignty of God under the banner of our free will.
Right.
Flip the premise. God always initiates. We can argue and debate, and people of great conscience have had, does God have double predestination, single, is there none? Lots of great theologians have debated this, but I don't know how anybody cannot begin from the premise that God must initiate in every aspect of a relationship on some level with human beings, because we cannot initiate with him. The Bible and the history of God's people makes that pretty clear. Moses didn't walk up to a burnt bush and say, please burn, I want to speak to God. That's not what happened. Okay. God always initiates.
That's right. And so I think the other element that kind of helps me in this conversation is you look at when, Jesus ascended into heaven, the life of the apostles. There's, when Jesus ascended into heaven, there's 500 Christians on this earth, at least that the Bible references. By the time Paul died, what were there, 20,000, 30,000? How many Christians were there by the time, Paul was taken? If you kind of look from what happened in the first century to where we're at now, obviously there's a bunch of troughs and dips and increases of success and not so successful times with the church in history, but you see there's far more Christians. The world is becoming Christianized over that time period. And so you are seeing the gospel being victorious throughout this earth. Now there's supposedly about 2 billion Christians here on earth, as opposed to when Jesus ascended, there was 500. So I do see that the church is being victorious. The gospel is winning. If Paul came back today, I've said this before on the show, if Paul came back today and walked around right now and, saw churches almost on every corner here in Idaho, of course, some of them are apostate, but he would be like, oh my gosh, I'm post-mill now.
I'll say this too. If you love America, my wife, I convinced her to do this for one of her first master's degree at Luther Rice Seminary several years ago. She had to take a course in eschatology to finish out her first master's for her Christian therapy degree. And the prof was a rabid pre-mill. She'd have me listen to the lectures, and he would say stuff like, I have the same eschatology that Jesus had, stuff like that. Okay. And I said, you know what? I'm going to help you with the outline. I mean, you're going to write your own paper, but I'll help you with the outline. You're going to write a paper that says that, because everybody else in the class is going to cater to him in his view. Okay. You're going to go the other way. You're going to say, without post-millennial thinking and theonomical tradition, there would never have been a United States of America, because those were the driving impulses of the Puritans' thoughts when they arrived on Plymouth Rock. So we can all sit here and debate whether we think that's still the most theologically correct position or not. But you cannot argue that without those two presuppositions, there would never have been a United States of America.
Yeah, they're coming off, a century earlier of the Westminster Confession and the 1689 London Baptist Confession. I mean, they had deep roots of theology just embedded in their souls when they came over. Well, hey, Steve, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate having you on. Everybody, for the Sunday special coming up, we have former CEO, Andrew Crappyshetz, talking about redballoon.work. Redballoon.work, really excited about some of the work that they're doing over at Red Balloon. It's basically just a free speech hiring business platform. Really excited about that show. So tune in Sunday night, 7 p.m. Look forward to seeing you guys next week on the Waterbreak. Until next time, go love God and go fight, laugh, and feast.
Let me give you this picture, because I don't think we think enough of sex.
One of the things we have to do is we have to think like Christians, and we have to think like Christians in every area. You can't simply have a piecemeal approach to this. We have to have a biblical worldview across the board. Across the board.
The sexual union between a man and his wife is a living, breathing, awe-inspiring expression of the ecstasy of the union that the church awaits.